How do you withstand a storm that threatens to disrupt your entire life? Many of you are facing this question in your own lives today, but I want to encourage you that there is life after the storm. After experiencing a devastating loss that forever changed the landscape of Jan Harrison's life, her faith was tested. But it was during this journey that she discovered how God was and is able to fill her every need. Now, with the help of her new book, Life After the Storm, Jan is encouraging others that God has a plan and will lead you to the other side. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Tammy.
I think it's worth mentioning that we go back a long way. You and my parents are very good friends, and Frank, your husband, as well. And most importantly, James, your son, and Graham, my brother, were best friends growing up.
That's crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy that we're here.
Yes.
Well, I want to read with you a few things that Graham wrote about James. I asked him to write a few things that he remembered most about him, and this is what he said. Everyone had that person growing up who was a few years older that they looked up to and wanted to be just like. James was that guy to me. He was the definition of cool. He was the kind of guy that gave up the life that most guys would kill for to serve the Lord. As a result, his legacy is not that he was the cool kid. It was giving up a life of comfort and prosperity to serve those who never knew comfort before they were introduced to Jesus. It was serving those who would never experience worldly prosperity, but learning from James that that prosperity they would have in the kingdom of heaven far exceeds any earthly prosperity the world has ever known. James was a great man, and although he is greatly missed, heaven is a much brighter place with him.
That's so sweet. That's so amazing.
I remember most about James is that I had the biggest crush on him. He's so handsome. But this October will be 5 years since the day he went to be with the Lord.
Yeah, 5 years.
That's crazy how fast time flies. But I imagine you remember everything about the day that you found out you lost James. Tell me about that day.
It was a glorious day in Charlotte, North Carolina. The sky was brilliant blue and the leaves were starting to change. The air was crisp and you just had that lightness in your step that a change of season seems to bring. And I remember it so vividly because I had that feeling change was about to take place. And I was at home working in my office, getting ready for a class I was going to teach the next day. And I heard dress shoes walking. The house was quiet and dress shoes walking on the wood floor in the middle of the day. And I just remember thinking, that has to be Frank, and what is he doing home at this time of day? And he came to the door of my office and he said, Jan, I need to tell you something. And I said, okay. And he said, let's go back here. I'm not really sure why, but we walked back to the other end of the house.
And at this point, did you feel like you knew something was wrong?
No, not yet. But he was walking in front of me. And when he turned around and I saw the look on his face, I knew that something horrible had happened. And he just very quietly said, Jan, we've lost James today. And the change that was in the air, it felt now like the earth had opened up and I was gonna just drop into it.
How do you get through something like that? I mean, I imagine that changes your whole world.
Whole world. You know, there is this, I think it is that protective grace of God that just almost immediately starts to envelop you. It's shock, literally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. You just are in shock and you're trying to absorb something so profound in an instant. So, you know, at first, I really do believe God shows up and he just carries you. You put the next foot in front of the other. And the harder thing is when that shock begins to wear off and the reality that this is forever. It's never going to go back to what it was. It's changed forever. That's when your faith is really tested.
But this had to take a toll on your faith. I mean, was there ever a point where you said, God, why me? I'm living my life as well as I can. I'm raising my kids in this Christian household. I'm doing the best I can. So why am I experiencing this?
I think more than why me, my questions were, where were you? Did I miss something that I should have discerned spiritually?
Because James, we need to share this. James was serving in Nairobi, right? He was with Open Eyes. That's, he
was serving the Lord. He was looking for a job as well. He was living with a local pastor, his friend, a mentor that he had known for like 5 years, and just really trying to, James was still really trying to find himself. He was 27 and he had worked a few years. He had done missions off and on for 5 or 6 years. By off and on, I mean going on these trips and making relationships with amazing people. But for years, Tanner, we have prayed over these children, prayed for James. James wasn't easy to raise. James wasn't exactly a church boy or a choir boy.
But so handsome.
But so handsome. And, God was just, we just gave him to the Lord. We prayed for him. And I think my questions and my faith were, Lord, I believed your word. I stood on your promises. We deposited the word of God in him. He knew you. He loved you. He wanted to serve you. He was still on the fence in a few areas, but he loved the Lord. And so my test was, the same God that gave me those promises, the same one whose word I stood on, he was the same. My circumstances were entirely different.
Your circumstances has changed. And that's what a lot of people in this world go through. Their circumstances change. And so you wrote this book, Life After the Storm, to really encourage people that they're going to get through their change of circumstances. What brought you to want to write this book?
Well, I never wanted to write a book.
That wasn't something you grew up wanting to do.
No, but I think the reason that I released my fear to write a book and to be so vulnerable about something so difficult is because, honestly, the comfort and the peace and the hope that God gave me day by day, hour by hour, through all of the changes and all of the sorrow, the darkness, the difficult days, he was there. He was there in such a very real and profound way, in such a sweet, gentle, caring way, that I wanted other people to know their life storm will probably be very different from mine, but God is the same, and he wants to offer that. When he does something for you, you want to share it.
Why do you think it's so difficult for people, even Christians, to trust God in such a time of difficulty like that?
Tanner, I think that we're all taught to trust someone we know and do not trust someone that we do not know. So I think for a lot of Christians, the thing that becomes difficult is if that relationship with the Lord is not deep and strong, and they have not learned to go to his word and walked by faith, if you don't know him well, it's very difficult to trust him when you can't make sense out of what's happening.
Definitely. And what about, talk to me about the after effects, because in your book you say that after effects are going to last forever. How do you encourage someone who's going through these after effects or who's going through these difficulties how do you encourage them that you're going to get through this?
You know, it's such an old, one day at a time. We hear that all the time. I think when your landscape is constantly moving and you are going through, you're still picking your way through all the after effects, you literally do begin to realize and embrace that you can only do today. And God has brought you this far. You have a new appreciation that God has brought you to this place. And, you at first didn't think you could make it a week, and then you don't think you can make it a month, and then it's a year, and then now it's almost 5. And it still is heartbreaking. But I think that you take a day at a time and you continue to grow in Him. Allow Him to speak to you in these dark places, and He shows you the next step.
I just want to thank you so much for putting so much of your heart into this and honesty, because I know there are a lot of people who are going through storms right now, and they need a copy of this book. And if you need a copy of this book, you can get it on our e-store, or you can check out your website, which is
janharrison.com, and I would love to walk with your listeners through their storms.
Before you pick up this book, make sure you call our prayer lines right now. If you're going through a storm of your own, we have people who want to talk to you. They want to pray with you. Please call our prayer lines at 1-866-273-4444. We have people standing by. Thank you so much for joining us again.